Hmm. Uh, huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today I've got a very interesting topic. Can't wait to get into it. Before we get into that, a couple of plugs. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca. You can also find us on our social media channels, Cryptid Clues on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and you can also check us out on our Patreon. You get ad-free exclusive episodes. And if you ever want to say hi, share a story, just chat, you can send us an email at cryptidclues@gmail.com. I apologize on behalf of Reuben. He wanted to be here today, but it's such as life, work, and everything like that, trying to balance it out. But he will be back for our next week's episode, which I believe we're going to be getting a little bit more into Bigfoot, do an introductory episode there. So should be some good stuff. So stay tuned. However, for today, the topic I wanted to dive into was missing flights. Now it's a little bit farther out from the cryptid realm, not really focusing on a specific being or entity, but there is an element here that I think is very fascinating, and I wanted to talk about a couple of inexplainable flights that have occurred in our history, with one very more recent one as well. And I think it just can kind of let us kind of like, no pun intended, but sky's the limit on what our thoughts could really be and our perspectives and how we can kind of see these, because there is so much going on in parts of the world, specifically on land, where there are inexplainable things. You see cryptids and experience things and sometimes just feel or get lost. And I'm wondering how this can transfer into being a pilot flying over the ocean and the similarities between these two things. So I've compiled 3 separate pivotal moments in our history that I think are the most seriously inquisitive parts. There's a whole archive online of missing flights that have no explanation that I suggest take a look into, because it is quite scary reading into some of these things and just how things can so easily go wrong. But I digress. So to start us off here, the first scenario is Flight 19, is what it's called. So what started as basically a routine training flight. This is around 2 p.m. on December 5th in 1945. There were 5 torpedo bombers that took off from a naval air base in Fort Lauderdale in Florida. So as a unit, the planes were known as Flight 19. And this is basically like, okay, there's Flight 18, 17, all doing the training run before them. Their scheduled itinerary was to tackle a 3-hour-long training exercise, which focused on, navigation problems and involved some bombing, practice bombs as well. So this triangular flight plan was essentially set up for the pilots to fly east from the Florida coast and to execute bombing runs at a place called Hens and Chicken Shoals. And then following this, they'd be directed north, taking them over the Grand Bahama Island, before making a final and third change in their direction that would take them back southwest towards the base that they departed from. Out of the 5 planes, 4 were crewed by about 3 military personnel, and 1 was crewed by only 2 individuals. Most, if not all of these crewmen had logged a record of about 300 plus hours of airtime. So these individuals are not new to this by any means. That's 300 hours in the air is excessively impressive, at least to me. I'm not a pilot, but this squadron was led by an experienced World War II lieutenant. So they have the skill backing them, and they have the knowledge and the insight. Everything should be fine. So of course, as the training started, like I said, it's all nice and smooth. There was even like the previous flights that executed the training prior, and they had done so all successfully. Your flight 17, 18, so forth. So there's no reason to suspect anything out of place, especially when you reach this 19th flight group that's going to execute the same training mission. Once 2:30 p.m. had hit, the pilots were soaring over Hens and Chicken Shoals. They successfully deployed their training bombs. Without any issue, they proceeded to turn north for the stage 2 of their training. This is when things go really upside down. The group lieutenant believed that his compass was starting to malfunction and that they were all flying south as opposed to north, and this escalated when a storm front started to come in with heavy rains and crosswinds. There was some radio chatter that was recorded by nearby military personnel, as well as other planes in the general area, so this comm chatter was constantly going off as they were talking to everyone in this training exercise. Such dialogue is as follows. I don't know where we are. We must have got lost after that last turn. That's not what you ever want to hear your pilot say. So I imagine that this crew of planes is just not happy with the lieutenant saying this as he's leading the charge of this exercise. Assistance, however, was immediately provided. There was a nearby flight instructor patrolling the Florida coastline. He called in the issue because he picked up on the comm chatter to the airbase, and they managed to communicate with the squad's lieutenant. At which point, the squadron's lieutenant says, both my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys. I don't know how far down. This is what the lieutenant stated. So he's referring to the Florida Keys specifically. And this is where things get, I don't want to say controversial, more sideways. The lieutenant's claims weren't making sense. Making the scheduled pass over hens and chicken shoals in the Bahamas less than an hour earlier somehow led him to believe his planes were hundreds of miles off course in the Florida Keys. Now, it's speculated that the islands of the Bahamas were confused with the Keys, as he was recently transferred there from Miami to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And best practice for pilots at this time was, if you're lost in the Atlantic, change course so your plane is directed towards the sunset, which will help guide you back to the west mainland. But that wasn't the case with the squad. He was still believing they were heading towards the Gulf of Mexico, and things only continued to get worse. They ended up heading eastward, which took them even further out over the ocean. This is where we get a little bit of dialogue that was kind of between the pilots. It resulted in speculation that maybe one of the planes broke formation and started flying the way they believed they were supposed to be going. This is where it got a little crazy. But however, some of the final dialogue that was recorded consisted of these disputes, and even to a point where they all changed course and were heading west in the right direction. But the lieutenant, some reason beyond understanding, went back on this decision and turned his squad to head east again. He was so consistent and set on just, we have to go this way. This is it. We probably didn't go far enough and the land is right there. So radio transmissions started to become more faint as the planes distanced themselves out into the sea. Signals weakening. Fuel eventually began to run low, and the last comms to come over the radio were the planes declaring like they were forming a tight formation in preparation of a water landing crash and possible ditching of the planes unless we hit land. And I quote, "When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." End quote. And that was it. No more radar. They only came in just as like a static buzz over the comms. There was nothing coming in anymore. So immediately, the Navy scrambled rescue planes, boats, search teams to head out and find the missing pilots. There's a PBM Mariner, which is like a flying boat, essentially. It floats on the water. We've got a lot of modern day types of these planes these days, and takes off from the water. And one of these followed the trajectory of this initial training squad out to sea. But again, oddly enough, they as well just disappeared from radar and went missing. This plane was crewed by 13 individuals. So the most logical speculation for this scenario was that the plane exploded shortly after takeoff. This is due to them actually being accident prone. They're even kind of mentioned as being sometimes like a flying gas, tank. So the only backup to that account was there's a nearby ship. I believe it was a merchant ship that actually reported seeing a fireball in the sky, and they even found a little bit of evidence of oil forming in this water, like oil slick, I believe is the term. So days started to go by and they were getting more planes and more boats. Over 300 boats and hundreds of aircraft just dispatched to find the missing squad and rescue this mariner that went missing now as well. After 5 days and more than 300,000 square miles of comb territory, they found nothing. They even went as far as to going into nearby land areas, checking it out, and there was not a single body or plane piece ever discovered. Of course, now moving forward a little bit, in the 1960s and 70s, speculation stirred that the Bermuda Triangle had a hand in these missing pilots, and then the usual stuff later on, consisting of possibly magnetic interference, portals opening up, even alien abductions. Something that just reading this account made me kind of attribute to was when you look at, if you've seen the movie Kong Skull Island, these two pilots from World War II go through this maelstrom and they crash on an island cut off from the rest of the world. This whole landmass is completely its own thing. But I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely out of the realm of possibility. Who knows what really happened to these pilots where they landed? I mean, it sounded like they were very close to coming to terms with crashing on the water, and they were all moving together. So if 5 of these planes crash lands together, you would have a good chunk of debris. Like, I guess they could sink right away, but a lot of debris that would shred up and just be floating on top of the surface of the water. So I would imagine that there would be some record or piece and shred of evidence, but I digress. We're the public, and the public isn't made aware of really everything, and especially when it comes to losing military hardware and people's lives, I feel like it's hard to sometimes get the real truth when those two things are connected. So that is basically a very famous account of what happened here. And this was again in the 1940s. And I found it fascinating just diving into that and what really could have happened throughout this. So I'm going to jump to a quick ad break and move on to the next, which will be actually focusing on Amelia Earhart. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So this disappearance, now she is an absolute icon. She was an amazing American aviator, and I thought this needs to be talked about. You know, someone that just set the bar so high and set so many accomplishments, you know, in avionics in our history, that the fact that this individual went missing, I just found it fascinating. So we're going back a couple of years now from the 40s, specifically to 1937, where Amelia Earhart and her navigator, called Frederick Noonan. So on July 2nd, the two of them were flying in a Lockheed aircraft when they went missing near Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean. So their goal initially was to fly around the world, and that's when it was speculated they lost bearings on their way from New Guinea to Howland Island. And this island is very small, sits roughly like 2,227 miles away, dead center, you know, in the Pacific Ocean. They had a U.S. Coast Guard ship within range, though, of this trek of Amelia, and they even had the comms opened up, received word on the comms that she was approaching Howland Island, was running low on fuel. And it's assumed that she ditched the plane in the sea. But like this case prior, no trace of Amelia or her navigator Frederick were ever found, or the wreckage. So, like I was saying, Amelia set records for being like the first woman to fly nonstop across the United States, as well as many more amazing accomplishments. She did transatlantic flights. Like, it was absolutely incredible what she did. So when it comes to this specific flight, it's worth noting that during the same year she went missing, on March 17th, Amelia and her navigator begun their around the world attempt flight following an equatorial route. So there was a third member who was a part of their team at this time. He was a former Pan American pilot. Upon reaching Honolulu, the 3 individuals rested, refueled, and prepped to head to, you guessed it, Howland Island. However, during their takeoff sequence, the plane suffered a blown tire, I believe, and Lockheed was significantly damaged. So the flight was scrapped, and the plane went back to California to be repaired. I found that really interesting how something here happened about them trying to get to this island. But moving forward, This didn't deter Amelia, and a few other flights took place, but once the plane was rebuilt, she retried the around the world flight, but swapped it around now. So it was going from west to east, unlike her last attempt, which was opposite. So in the final push of this flight, it would take them solely over the Pacific Ocean, leaving the last destination, as should have been Howland Island. The U.S. Department of Commerce had set up a fueling station, runway, and supplies all on this island in preparation for her arrival, which included the previous mentioned Coast Guard ships nearby. Now, it's worth noting this island, it was very, very small, but yeah, they set up a runway. They had a weather station on this island as well. And I Google mapped it because I wanted to see, and there is nothing near this island. It's super cool if you could get to it. I saw there's photos people had of seagulls on this island. I guess people boat out a few hours trip out to this island, but there's a couple cool little constructs on the island made out of rocks and stone and everything like that. And there's one island south, it looks pretty far. You'd have to have a pretty good raft, but there's nothing there, nothing out there. Just ocean. So, as Amelia neared the island, she called over the comms to the Coast Guard that she was low on fuel, and this is where communication starts to get messy. There was only a minor, brief established moments of this two-way chatter because there was strong levels of interference. But it was enough to let Amelia supposedly circle the Coast Guard ship's position. So at this point, she believes that she is within range of this ship and the ship is below her within proximity. But the ship was trailing miles upon miles of black smoke as an alert, just to let Amelia know where things were, get her bearings. She wasn't able to find the ship. There was no smoke in her proximity that she could see, even though her bearings told her that she was on the ship. Not literally, but within proximity of it. So the ship was completely as well unable to pinpoint Amelia's location. And her last comms alert stated that she had, and I quote, 1/2 hour fuel and no landfall, end quote. She attempted to provide more information as well on her location, but it didn't help. And it's speculated that she tried to land the plane on the water's surface. Extensive searches by the Coast Guard and the U.S. Navy resulted in not a single piece of physical evidence on both the pilots or the plane itself. It's absolutely, though, worth noting the accomplishments set by Amelia Earhart. I just want to label it out there, and how her legacy serves as an inspiration to pilots everywhere. But when you really can't help but wonder what really happened after these comms dropped. Why were these comms dropping? I didn't find anything about there being a storm front moving in, causing disruptive measures over the radio. And for what sounds like a pretty, they set up all these contingencies. They set up all these people to be stationed and ready to help because this is a difficult leg of the journey. But you have this highly experienced pilot, a very experienced navigator, and you have to can't help but wonder, okay, what's really going on here? Like, what is working against you? What factors are popping up as roadblocks in front of you, preventing you from being able to figure out a way through this? I feel like where did they end up? It's, again, I've been using the term speculated a lot, and that's the word of the episode today. It's speculated that she might have crash landed on another small island nearby where they found, it's notorious for finding plane parts and of such of that category, but we don't know what happened to her. We really don't, and it's a shame. It's such an iconic woman of our history just vanishing like this, but her legacy will always still remain. So I wanted to talk about this because I think there's probably a lot of people that, if you're unaware of who she is, I mean that's very unfortunate. But now you've heard this is look into her history, look at her accomplishments, but now you also can be aware of, hey, she went missing and there's no explanation for it. So I'm not going to slander or anything like that. I don't want to say user error or anything along those lines because I don't know. I really don't know. But it's just an intriguing and very intriguing, unfortunate series of events. And with that, I'm going to move along to another very mysterious airline scenario here. So this one happened very recent. Well, maybe not very recent. 8 years ago is not very recent, but it happened within the last decade. The Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 that went missing. So this took place in 2014 on March 8th. It was a Boeing 777 plane that had taken off from Kuala Lumpur Airport. There were 239 people on board, and it was scheduled to arrive in Beijing 6 hours later. Seems straightforward, but for some unknown reason, 40 minutes into its flight path, it diverted south and headed into the Indian Ocean. Shortly after, it completely disappeared from any and all radar systems. This triggered a multi-million-dollar investigation that spanned internationally and eventually was called off when no evidence was ever found come 2018. So a lot of money went into this. A lot of international agencies, entities came together to actually look into this. I saw there were some very private corporations that came in trying to find out what was really happening. And the level of theories that stem out from this, I think it goes to show how social media has really played a factor in today's narrative of what's unknown and mysterious things are happening. So if you backtrack like to our other encounters that we were talking about, you can see, okay, it seems like a pretty cohesive, straightforward narrative with a couple of speculated perspectives that stem out of prominent researchers and the military and so forth. But when you're dealing with something like this is something that's extremely public, dealing with people from all walks of life boarding onto one plane, and a company's reputation that's on the line, and people with the ability to access the internet and a phone are just going to run rampant with theories, trying to just spread any kind of sideways narrative they can. So this is where it gets really hard to kind of weave through the truth and the reality to find what is real and what is fake. So there were some theories that I was reading a lot of them, and it was wild. But there is hijacking, CIA related plots, self-claimed fame, pilot having long lost love. It's just absolutely bonkers, the kind of things that kind of spread out through this. But I'm going to get to one of the speculated explanations here right after this quick ad break. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So an aviation expert called Christine Negroni believes that the plane's captain may have taken a break, leaving the co-pilot at the controls, at which point a sudden cabin depressurization occurred, resulting in the death of all passengers and crew within a span of 15 minutes. Now, this would have left only the co-pilot alive, flying the plane for hours on end before crashing. The cockpit would have been insulated and sealed, so it would have resulted in the co-pilot being devoid of any effect of the depressurization, taking any significantly damaging toll on him. Now, what could have happened a few hours afterwards could have been the plane suffering from cracks or just more damage, hull damage. That was another theory that was spun where people suspected that it was pre-existing damage to the plane. One popular social media theory, though, is that the thought of a secondary Bermuda Triangle area in the Indian Ocean. And again, that I'm not saying we're limited to one Bermuda Triangle area on the planet. There is the one significant one that has resulted in many, many unexplainable events, but it doesn't mean that it's the only one by any means. There are definitely areas on this planet that are inexplainable. It was a level and degree of energy that output could be a magnetic interference of some sort. So between these two, I found that first one to be a terrifying concept. This pilot flying a ghost plane of hundreds of deceased passengers is such a sad possibility. And again, the theories that span beyond what I've listed here today, some are certainly more plausible than others, but at the end of the day, the ocean is a massive place. Just as we know little about what's really down below, underneath the surface, I think it can be equally said for what is above. As rare as it happens, planes do experience errors and sometimes crash. And that being said, it's still a very safe way to travel. I'm not a pilot, but I always love flying in planes. I love being in them, and that was definitely a change around because when I was young and I'd never been on a plane yet, I was terrified. But once I was going onto the little like water planes that kind of land and take off on the water, I was just in love with those, and I love being on the giant Boeing planes and getting to fly around and everything like that. Like there's so much joy in flying. It's just such a beautiful perspective, and you do feel safe. So there are many contingencies additionally established to help a pilot in the event they become unable to do their job. Hence the co-pilot, the crew, have you have backups to your backups. Basically, these are things that come through so much trial and error at the very unfortunate expense of crashes and people dying in the past, where it teaches us, and their deaths serve as a pivotal moment in our history that we can learn from and improve to help save lives going forward in the future. But when everything seems to turn against you and you have these backups just not working and the contingencies, this does happen in a life or death scenario, but what are all the elements causing this? Why would a pilot go against their better judgment and fly north over south? Turn to go in the correct direction and then just be, against their better judgment, go back the other way? Why would a pilot deviate? Why would a pilot not see a cloud of black smoke on a day that's clear as can be when it's supposed to be there? And just because no debris is ever found doesn't dismiss the fact that they didn't crash into the ocean. It's the same as a plane crashing in the most dense forests on the planet with no way to find any evidence. So it doesn't dismiss the idea as well of aliens or magnetic forces, if you want to run with that narrative, but we can't assume these things. It's interesting to speculate them and keep searching, and that's all you can do when it comes to these inexplainable plane crashes. There are many cases where debris is left over, but it's the element of how and why they crash, sometimes into other planes. It's a complete mystery. And that is something as well I attribute to the area maybe the flight takes place over. It's something we have to do more research and really learn. That was one thing that me and Reuben talked about, the Grand Canyon in last week's episode. That was something that was, again, pulled from that location. There were two planes that actually crashed into each other, which logistically, it doesn't make sense why they ended up in this flight path and towards each other. But these things happen. Is it human error? Is it technology error? There are an endless amount of possibilities and an equally amount of crazy theories. But all we can do is just keep searching and be vigilant and finding the evidence to support what really happened. But I digress. The Earth is a constantly shifting place, and we're all struggling to keep up. So that is all I really have today on the planes. I just thought these missing airlines and missing like adventurers out there doing these, or military personnel, doing these training sessions. There's so much mystery behind these. And I hope that this episode serves as a good kind of introduction and grounding point to run with this topic even on your own time, and just do the research and explore, like, okay, what kind of elements are connected in these areas? What other planes have gone missing in our history? And maybe you'll find a piece, you'll find something I probably missed, or find something maybe someone, a professional, has missed. But it's just such a fascinating topic, and it's as fascinating as it is very sad, because these are people's lives that are taken in these scenarios. And finding answers can be good, and sometimes can be dangerous sometimes too. But I think when it comes to these types of individuals, these types of individuals, I don't know what that means. When it comes to individuals that are doing things for, it's their job, or they're trying to be, inspiration for future generations, or they're just doing what they do and they go missing, I think it's important to honor their legacy and their memory and find the truth to help, their families and everything like that. And if you want to go as far as attributing, this is on a public scale when a plane goes missing, you can imagine all the people that are not publicly acknowledged that go missing in our forests and flying little smaller planes that the media doesn't cover. I'm sure that list is very steep, but again, I digress. So until next time, thank you for tuning into this episode of Cryptid Clues. I am Taylor. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca. Send us an email at CryptidClues@gmail.com. And you can find us on our social media channels, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and our Patreon. You get ad-free early episodes. So until next time, I'll see you guys soon. Stay safe and take care.